They said Islam oppresses women. That's what they told you, isn't it? That the veil is a symbol of submission, that Muslim women have no voice, no choice, no power. But what if I told you that the truth is far more complex, far more grounded, and perhaps even liberating? What if I told you that many of the claims made about Islam and women are not rooted in the religion itself, but in the cultural interpretations that have layered themselves over centuries? Let's start with the veil, the hijab. To some in the West, it looks like oppression. But to many Muslim women, it is a declaration, not of silence, but of autonomy. It says, I choose how I am seen. I choose what I show to the world. Jordan Peterson often speaks of voluntary sacrifice, of order, of discipline chosen rather than imposed. The hijab, when chosen freely, fits within this framework. It becomes not a muzzle, but a statement of identity, modesty, and moral clarity. The question we must ask is not whether the veil is oppressive, but whether the woman wearing it had a choice. Choice is critical. Peterson reminds us that true freedom requires responsibility. That freedom without boundaries leads to chaos, not liberty. So, when a woman chooses modesty, faith, family, and structure, is she truly oppressed? Or is she living within a framework of values that she has assessed and accepted? Too often, Western critics project their assumptions about happiness, freedom, and success onto people in entirely different circumstances. This is intellectual colonialism, telling others how to live, how to think, what to wear, based on one's own cultural lens. Islam, when you look into its original texts, the Quran, the Hadith, offers women rights that were revolutionary at the time of its revelation. The right to own property. The right to work. The right to inherit. The right to choose a spouse. The right to divorce. Long before many other civilizations even entertained these ideas, Islam codified them. If these rights are violated today, it is often due to local customs, patriarchal governments, or misinterpretations, not the core tenets of Islam. Peterson often explores the danger of conflating ideology with truth. He speaks against the tyranny of collectivism, the blindness of sweeping generalizations. When people say, Islam oppresses women, they make a totalizing claim that ignores nuance, context, and evidence. They ignore the voices of millions of Muslim women who say, this is not my experience. And isn't it ironic that those shouting the loudest about freedom of speech and expression often deny Muslim women the freedom to express themselves, if that expression includes faith? There's a strange contradiction in modern discourse. A woman wearing a bikini is celebrated as empowered. A woman wearing a hijab is pitied as oppressed. But what if both are exercising agency? What if both are choosing their path based on belief, conviction, or personal narrative? Isn't that the very essence of freedom? Peterson urges us to confront the chaos within and impose order, to listen, to observe, to think deeply before we judge. In that spirit, it becomes essential to distinguish between the teachings of Islam and the actions of individuals or governments who claim to represent it. If a regime suppresses women, we must ask, does it do so because of Islam, or in defiance of it? Consider education. The Prophet Muhammad said, seeking knowledge is obligatory for every Muslim, male and female. And yet, in some areas today, girls are denied education. Is that Islam? Or is that power hiding behind a religious mask? To conflate the two is to commit an injustice not only against the faith but against those who suffer under false interpretations of it. Jordan Peterson speaks about meaning being found in responsibility. Muslim women across the world bear immense responsibilities, as mothers, professionals, leaders, thinkers, activists. Their faith does not shackle them, it often empowers them. And yet, their stories are ignored because they don't fit the dominant narrative. So why does the myth persist? Why is the oppression narrative so seductive? Partly because it's easy. It flattens complexity. It allows critics to feel morally superior. But it also serves geopolitical goals. It's easier to justify intervention, control, or cultural dominance if you paint the other side as barbaric. And yet, true dialogue begins with humility, with asking, not telling. Peterson often warns against arrogance masquerading as virtue. To hear God clearly, he says, you must first quiet your own voice. Perhaps that's what the West must do when speaking about Muslim women: listen more, assert less. Freedom isn't always loud. Sometimes, it whispers in prayer. Sometimes, it stands with dignity behind a veil. Sometimes, it teaches a classroom full of girls. Sometimes, it challenges a regime from within. Sometimes, it simply lives, quietly, confidently, without seeking your approval. In the end, the question is not, does Islam oppress women? But, are we willing to listen to the women who live it? That's where the truth begins. They said Islam oppresses women. But what if we've been asking the wrong question all along? What if, instead of assuming oppression, we began by seeking understanding, not from the outside, but from within the faith, from within the experiences of the very women we think we are defending? Jordan Peterson often emphasizes the necessity of individual responsibility, and the danger of ideological possession. The narrative that Islam inherently oppresses women is an ideological stance, it is not an empirically examined truth. When you dig beneath the headlines and surface-level perceptions, you begin to see a far more nuanced picture. Not a utopia, but not the dystopia often described either. Start with the lived experience. Muslim women across continents, from Indonesia to Morocco, Nigeria to Canada, are making decisions every day that reflect their faith and their freedom. They are scientists, scholars, artists, engineers, mothers, entrepreneurs, and leaders. Their Islam is not a cage, but a compass. A framework that gives direction in a world consumed by chaos. Peterson often speaks of the importance of frameworks, structures of belief that orient our actions. For many, Islam is that structure. Take the issue of marriage. Critics point to arranged marriages or guardianship laws in certain regions. But again, we must ask, are these religious mandates or cultural traditions? The Quran explicitly requires a woman's consent for marriage. The Prophet Muhammad nullified marriages where women were forced. Where abuses occur, they occur in spite of Islam, not because of it. Peterson warns of reducing people to categories, of failing to see the individual. Muslim women are not a monolith. They do not all experience faith the same way. To generalize is to dehumanize. Let's consider the economy. Islam grants women financial independence. A woman's wealth is her own. She is not obligated to spend it on her family. That responsibility falls on the man. How revolutionary is that? Even today, in many so-called progressive societies, women struggle for equal pay or economic agency. In Islam, those principles were enshrined 1,400 years ago. Again, the issue is not the doctrine, but the departure from it. Misuse. Misrepresentation. Peterson reminds us constantly of the need to wrestle with truth, not accept it passively, not impose it arrogantly, but to confront it honestly. And if the truth is that Muslim women find strength, structure, and dignity in their faith, then we must listen. Not to confirm our biases, but to challenge them. Let's also address the issue of voice. The stereotype is that Muslim women are silent, submissive. But history tells a different story. Khadijah, the Prophet's wife, was a businesswoman and his emotional pillar. Aisha, another wife, narrated more than 2,000 hadiths, religious sayings and actions. Fatima, his daughter, stood firm against power when necessary. These women shaped the very foundation of Islamic civilization. Their stories are not of suppression but of contribution. In modern times, women like Malala Yousafzai, Dalia Mogahed, Ibtihaj Muhammad, and countless others carry that legacy forward. They speak, they led, they act, not in spite of Islam, but often inspired by it. They are not anomalies. They are evidence. Peterson speaks about the logos, the word, the truth. In Islam, the word of God is revered, memorized, internalized. Millions of Muslim girls memorize the Quran. They lead families, educate peers, become lawyers, doctors, and activists. They speak truth to power, not only to governments but sometimes to their own communities. Reform does not mean rejection. It can mean returning to first principles. Critics say, look at Iran, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia. But must a faith be judged by its worst adherents? Shall we judge Christianity by the Spanish Inquisition? Or democracy by the crimes of colonialism? If we are to be intellectually honest, we must distinguish between religion and regime, between belief and abuse of power. Peterson warns that when we ignore complexity, we invite tyranny, of thought, of ideology. We must understand the difference between religion as a personal moral system and religion used as a political weapon. Many Muslim women understand this difference deeply. They live it. And still, they hold on to faith. That is resilience. That is not weakness. That is not oppression. We live in a world obsessed with optics. And in that world, the image of the veiled woman becomes an icon of oppression to the uninformed. But isn't it interesting that the same societies that accuse Islam of controlling women also commodify them through advertising, fashion, and media? Who, then, defines freedom? Who gets to decide what liberation looks like? Peterson challenges us to ask whether we truly understand what we see, or whether we simply believe what we've been told. To hear God clearly, as Peterson might say, requires silence. A space within where the noise of ideology, judgment, and ego fade. In that space, many Muslim women pray. They read. They reflect. They act. They raise children with values, led lives of service, pursue excellence, Not because they are told to, but because they believe in something higher. Something ordered. Something meaningful. Freedom is not the absence of limits. It's choosing the right ones. Discipline, modesty, faith, these are not inherently oppressive. In fact, they are often the very elements that anchor people in turbulent times. Peterson knows this. He teaches this. And in that way, his philosophy converges with a truth known to millions of Muslim women long before he ever spoke it. So maybe, just maybe, it's time we stop speaking about them and start speaking with them. Not to judge, but to understand. Not to save, but to learn. Because the truth will shock you. Not because Islam is oppressive, but because everything you thought you knew about it might be wrong. And if that discomforts you, good. Because that's where learning begins.